We have arrived in part 9 of the urinary system right here, part 9 on page 973. We were coming through this diagram right here, and we had just begun to talk about the distal convoluted tubule. Notice that we're getting some reuptake of sodium, chloride, calcium. This is relatively fine tuning. It's not a busy place as compared to over here. This is a super busy place here at the proximal convoluted tubule. Distal convoluted tubule, no brush border inside here, much more sort of subtle tuning going on. We have most of what we need back in the blood already. So now we're actually going to be looking at the secretion here of potassium under the influence of aldosterone. So I've created that influence right here. This is supposed to be the chief cells of the cortical collecting duct right here, and aldosterone is acting upon that. And so basically we're getting reabsorption of sodium. Sodium comes out for two reasons. It's going to go back into the blood, but it's mostly going to go to the interstitial space here, and it's going to create tonicity. That's the important detail here, is we want tonicity. And then potassium is going to be exchanged for that sodium, just the way you like it. Okay, then we come down here. This is the collecting duct. This is the distal convoluted tubule. The collecting duct gets tributaries from many distal convoluted tubules. The filtrate, this is the final avenue for the filtrate. And ADH works here. Remember, ADH from the posterior pituitary works right here. And that means that we're going to have aquaporins, and we're going to get then reabsorption here of mostly water, and some urea is going to follow with that. Now, why do we want urea? Why don't we just leave the urea in here? It turns out that the urea, and this is an important point, has a cycle going through here, and it's adding to the sodium. The reason we have sodium here is to increase the tonicity. You can see the colors getting darker, darker, darker. That means there's more and more sodium. And then we use urea, which is going to be a waste material anyway. We bring it back in for the sole purpose of adding that to the sodium to increase the tonicity. So now we have a really strong tonicity because we have both urea and sodium. And so that's the purpose here of the ADH acting here. We have water that's going to be following this highly tonic, interstitial space. And that means we're going to be getting more water back into the blood. We don't actually picture the vasa recta blood vessels right here. You have to sort of use your imagination. Oh, there's sodium here, and it's highly tonic, super salty, shall we say. And basically the water is following and then being taken back up into the bloodstream, which is running alongside of both of these things right here. Okay, now we're going to press on to the next page, and there's a number of song and dances here, but I just sort of created my own little world over here so that you can see what's called, this is sometimes called the countercurrent multiplier in older textbooks. But it's easy enough to see. Remember how the descending loop of Henle is able to release water, and more water comes out as you get into more tonic spaces. Here there's not a lot of tonicity, and then it gets to be more and more and more tonicity. As we look through here, you'll notice that it says 300 milliosmoles compared to, 900, even 1,200 milliosmoles. That's really, super salty down there. Here is the vasa recta. I actually drew right in the capillaries here. So the water comes out and it goes back into the blood. And that's what you want. You want to have an expanded blood volume. You don't want to lose your blood volume and lose your blood pressure. So that's an important detail. Okay? And now we're down here. Now all that water has left. We have super concentrated this is the fluid that's inside and soon to become urine. As we come up this way, what we do is we take advantage of that tonicity, and we have, first of all, sodium and chloride passively leave Okay, so we're increasing our tonicity. And then we actually pump it out. Both the sodium and the chloride is going to get pumped out. Okay, and so that's going to increase more and more and more the tonicity of the interstitial spaces here, and of course more water is going to come out. We get to the distal convoluted tubule over here. So I want you to be aware of this dynamic. Okay, and now over here we have a comparison study that's going on. And what are they comparing? Let's take a look at what's going on. There we go. It says here, if we were so overhydrated, that is to say, let's say I just chugged down a whole pint of water, and we have no ADH, which means that my blood volume is adequate and no ADH is being released. Okay, so I've just chugged down all that water. Some of the water comes out over here and here, but basically we have some urea coming through, but no water, right? And so that means that we're going to have, how shall I say, we're going to have a lot of urine, and it's going to be very dilute urine, okay? And that's the idea here, is that if we drink lots and lots of water, we're going to have lots and lots of urine, and it's going to be very pale in color, okay? And then let's check out the comparison study over here. So if we were let me get this angle right, so dehydrated that we have maximum amounts of ADH. Let's check that out. It's been a long time since I had my last drink. I've done a lot of activity, so there's a lot of waste products. And again, the water is coming out. We have a high concentration, and I'm pumping a lot of sodium out. Okay, passive here, pumping here. I come out over here, and now because there's ADH available, I have aquaporins, and now I have ever more water passing out. There's even more urea in order to increase the tonicity here, so I get more and more and more water, and quite possibly I have no urine, or it's only a small volume of urine, and it's highly concentrated, dark in color. Okay, so that's that situation right there. Okay, so then we talk about renal clearance is our next avenue of discussion. It's a calculated thing. You're not going to have to go through calculation, so don't worry. But it is something we can solve for. And what we do is we have a specified amount of liquid that we drink, and then we stick something in that liquid, in this case called inulin. Inulin is a long polysaccharide, and it's a plant polysaccharide. It's sort of like a long chain of glucose molecules, sort of like a starch, but it's relatively simple, and it has certain features. First of all, it has the ability to be cleared, that is to say, it very easily becomes filtered. We don't reabsorb any of it, nor do we actually secrete any of it. So it's just something very simple and sort of neutral, you could say. So it says when inulin is infused, such that's very bad English, its plasma concentration is a particular amount, 1 milligram per milliliter. Right, so we know what the concentration is. We know how much we're drinking. Right, so we ingest whatever it is, 125 milligrams of inulin per milliliter, and then we wait and see what happens. So what happens ultimately is once we've collected all of our inulin, then we compare it to everything else. So anything that is passing through with exactly the same value as inulin means that it is something which is fully reabsorbed, or rather it is fully filtrated but not reabsorbed and not secreted. And then there's some things that don't show up in the urine at all. You wouldn't expect it. And that such a thing is, for instance, glucose. You would not like to see glucose in the urine because that means that you've hit a transport maximum with regard to the reuptake of glucose back to the blood. Okay, so that's a bad sign. So you'd like to have glucose as 0 ultimately here. Okay, so we'll come back to this in just a moment with our next part, and we'll make a complete study of it.